Welcome back to another episode of Jargon, powered by Avalon Technologies, your go-to podcast for deep dives into engineering, AI, and how tech transforms enterprises. I'm your host, Dan Gribble, with Todd Johnson and Rob Rollison. And today's special guest is Parth Shah, the co-founder and CEO of Polimorphic, an AI-first GovTech startup automating frontline services for local governments, serving over 36 million residents, slashing voicemails by 90%, and saving 55,000 hours of staff time every day. With an MIT degree in electrical engineering and computer science, Parth began his career at NVIDIA and Nodal, then launched Polimorphic in 2019. Under his leadership, the company just closed an $18.6 million Series A led by General Catalyst to scale AI-powered chatbots, voice systems, CRM, and GovGPT tools that make services faster, more human, and more effective. Parth's mission? To bridge the public sector gap through modernizing permits, payments, and queries with AI, so governments can build trust and boost efficiency. Today, we'll explore how Polimorphic's AI-first GovGPT, front desk, CRM, and voice bots are reshaping local government services, what it truly takes to go from navigating bureaucracy at NVIDIA and Nodal to launching a GovTech startup from scratch, and what the future of AI looks like to Parth. Let's dive in. Parth, welcome to the Jargon. Thank you for joining us today.
Dan, thanks for having us. Todd and Rob, excited to be here. Excited to dive in and talk all things AI with you.
We're happy to have you. I mean, it's cool to have someone on that is focusing on the government market around AI, because that's a big challenge for that area right now. So we appreciate your time. We know you're busy. You're always traveling. You're building a business here. So we'll get this thing going. So to get started, what's the story behind Polymorphic? How'd that idea first come to life?
Yeah, no, there's really, I would say, two pieces to it, right? So one is, I would say, more practically how the idea came to be. And so that was through an experience I had at a small company. We were working with the city of Boston and a few other folks around the smart city space. And the whole idea was using location data to plan safer cities. So very fancy way of just saying, a lot of places have data on where car collisions happen, where their infrastructure is located, things like that. However, when you go to plan, should we put a stop sign or traffic light here? They don't use any of that data. So there's no insight of, hey, is it going to reduce the amount of accidents, or is it going to make this street more walkable? There's no way to quantify that. And so that was the idea behind the company. Very, very, frankly, very interesting and high impact idea. But as we spent time with a lot of the local governments and agencies around that, what we realized was this was probably a second or third order pain point for them to solve, right? The fundamental thing, and this I think is at the heart of what Polymorphic does. It is where I learned my philosophy on government, which is I call it the most complicated and largest customer service organization in the world. And that's what I realized the real pain point was on, which is, it is great to plan data analytics and use that to inform decision making. Before you do that, though, you have the fundamental job of there are millions of services offered by governments. And the way that's done today is primarily a huge strain on staff spending their day-to-day efforts on that. And they're often using pen and paper or legacy systems to provide those services. And so that's where you get that constituent frustration. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is I would say more personal, which is I have a family background in this world too. So my grandfather, he was a utility director for his whole career. And my grandmother worked in state government. I think a lot of the technology world, frankly, it looks at government and says, they're behind the times. They don't really care about technology. There's not an incentive. And I couldn't disagree more, right? I really couldn't disagree more because I come from that public servant background. And it's not it's a thankless job often, right? People only call and reach out to complain when things aren't working. No one's saying, hey, thanks thanks that the water is running, thanks that I can drive on the roads, right? Thanks that I could get a permit. And so, it's one of those thankless jobs that I would say is probably the most important, right? It's the things we take for granted. And I think they're facing a real crisis, which is there's massive staff shortages. They have not been able to keep up with customer service demand. And I know we'll get into this, but frankly, the best answer is going to be, what can AI do to help make sure these services that we have come to rely on don't disappear or deteriorate significantly in quality over the next 4 or 5 years as mass retirements come, as expectations continue to increase.
Wow. Okay. That's phenomenal. So was there a specific aha moment that made you realize that I have to build this. Like I have to go solve this.
Yeah, 100%. So before we got in this world, we spent a lot of time, I was spending some time just working on a few different projects. And one of those was with legislators. And we had thought that kind of cities, counties, state agencies would be interesting. And, I was talking to some legislator on some other thing. And, he came back to me and said, hey, I'm a legislator part-time. I'm a state senator part-time. My full-time job is I work for my local municipality. And he kind of looked at me and said, yeah, we need some technology at the legislative level. It would definitely be nice. But he was very clear on, he's like, yeah, we need this in the municipality. Like, we need this in our local government, our state agencies. Like, the way we do operational work, especially around customer service, is so difficult with the systems we have today. Like, it is not easy. And so that was kind of this moment where I'm talking to this person about their other role, and I know nothing about, I didn't even know that was his day job. And he was like, this is where you really got to spend time. And when you start to hear that a lot, I think we started to get just experiences where people were just like, hey, what can we do with AI? And I think that was something that really surprised me, is everyone says, government sometimes has been behind on certain adoption curves, right? Cloud adoption took a little bit more time, other things like that. I feel like with AI, I've been having conversations with government that are in line with what the most innovative stuff in the private sector are doing, right? Like, we were able to launch, and we'll get into some of the offerings, but we were able to launch some of our chatbots and AI search before Google launched their AI search. And so I think that's crazy to think about, is that like governments actually beat Google to that in some ways. And we talk about, hey, are we behind the curve? Not really. I think it really depends on, if you have great partners, there's a lot of desire to innovate, I think, in a lot of these organizations. So I think those two really put together the aha moment for me. One was the deep pain point and need, and then two was, I think the narrative of, is government ready to adopt technology, has been very different from the reality of the conversations we've had with folks within the government.
You're correcting the stigma and proving them wrong.
That's right. That's always a good thing, right? Obviously, with the aha moments, I'm sure there's been some, funny or humbling experiences that you've had, since being around since 2019. What were like the earlier days like? Were there any stories that are worth sharing that that kind of came from the startup in the trenches?
I mean, this is gonna sound like a funny example. I think this is why. I think this ethos is part of the reason why our customers really love our products, because they really feel like it understands them. But when we built our first like feature, even, I'm not even calling it a product, we worked out of a town hall. Like, we sat in town hall, we had a desk and everything, and in another county I worked in, they joked they had this empty office, and they finally filled it recently, but for a while they joked that was like Parth's office. Like, even though, so I think that was like very humbling, was to see just like they really, at the time and even today, think of us as part of their team. Like, they really see that. And I think there's often this word vendor, I think, leaves a bad taste in folks' mouths, right? Where it's like, it's really, we're partners. And I think that I think was like really funny to hear, like, yeah, that empty office, like, they're like, yeah, we're gonna put your name there, or you're gonna work out of town hall. And it was really, we barely had a desk, we didn't have an office, right? We're coming and working out of their building. And I just thought that was really amusing. Was we had so many fun experiences with that. I also always joke, a lot of people ask us where the name comes from. And my funny version of that is like, I give everyone 2 stories. Like, I'm like, there's 2 reasons the name is named, right? So polymorphic, polis means city, morph means to reshape. So like, we're trying to reshape our governments. We're trying to remove more. The second story I joke is, it was the only available .com domain that would define it. So there's a lot of things like that where it's like, I think we back into giving meaning to things, and the truth is like, there were certain situations where it's, hey, we just had to get a domain. We had to get this stuff up. And I think those are sometimes the funniest things that end up sticking with you.
Those are amazing. I love it.
That's a great story. Thanks for sharing.
Absolutely.
So Parth, I know we touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but some listeners might not be familiar with Polymorphic. Are you able to tell us exactly what Polymorphic does and what customers you're trying to serve?
100%. Yeah. So at a really simple level, I talked a little bit about the problem space we're interested in, and I think that's really where I like to start, right? Which is, right now, if you're a constituent, you want to interface with government services, right? I might have a simple question, right? I'm not going to know which department handles my issue, what specific permit I need, or what specific, piece of the ordinance I need to look at to see if I can build a deck in my backyard. So most constituents come with a question. And when you go to the website or you call in or anything like that, it is hard to navigate, right? And it is no fault of the city, county, or state agency. It's just complicated because there's so many different services governments provide, right? And so for the constituent, there's this challenge of, one, how do I even find what I need, right? And I can go through a keyword search, or I end up calling in, and then I get these phone trees. I might be working 9 to 5, so I'm going to call after hours. And at that point, the staff isn't working, so I'm not having a voicemail. They're going to call me back, right? It's this very difficult process. And then when I finally do find the right thing to do, very often it's going to be, hey, here's a PDF to submit it, or you got to mail in a check. And even after I do that, there's so many internal steps that go on. And so I don't know, it kind of goes into a black box. And so we're so used to now with Amazon being able to pay online,
Right.
package track, all these things that we take for granted that we don't get when we apply for what I would say are really, really critical services, right? When people apply for anything from, a permit to food stamps to there's an issue on my road, right? That would be stuff that I would like to know the status on, right? If I could get that kind of package tracking spirit. So that's a constituent frustration. And then for staff, I think there's a lot of people don't understand, and I think we try to lead with empathy for the staff, because that's really who we serve in many ways, right? Which is, we're actually serving the cities, the counties, and state agencies who deliver these services. And they face the equal challenge on the other side, which is, if you governments take a lot more phone calls than people realize. They take a ton of phone calls, right? Each organization, if you just calculated what the cost of them handling phone calls is, it's massive. It's in the millions to tens of millions for most organizations, which is a crazy way of framing it, but that is the cost. And if you look at those calls, over half of those is content that could be answered on the website. Another quarter of that is calls that were meant for another department that, frankly, it was just confusing, so I didn't know which department to go to. And so that boils down to what Polymorphic does, right? We're an AI customer service platform. So what that means is we have 2 key pieces to that. One is we have, AI chat, AI search, SMS, voice, all the different mediums folks can reach out to on. But AI is basically either A, answering those basic questions, or B, getting you routed to the right person on your first try. So we're moving everything into a much more streamlined experience that way. It's on 24/7, speaks 75 languages. So we're making that student experience amazing. And the second piece of that is we're integrating with their existing systems, plus have our own, we call our AI CRM, agentic workflows. We're helping automate a lot of the internal process that goes into delivering that service. And those are the 2 reasons staff love us. They're saving tons of time on those repeat calls. Constituents love it because they're getting their questions answered faster. And it's a white glove customer service experience. And then the internal process too, that's where staff is really spending a lot of their time. We jokingly have our package tracking for all those services, which residents end up loving because they can follow along. So in short, we put that whole idea we think of as an AI customer service platform.
Wow, that is really amazing.
Parth, a follow-up really quick to that. Yeah. So the more we learn about polymorphic, and at Avalon, we work with a lot of different customers, government, higher education, K through 12, and just as someone that has kids in schools and colleges, I see this as a huge opportunity for higher ed, K through 12. I mean, because some of the phone trees there are crazy, and trying to find like, I'll give you an example. Just finding the holiday schedule sometimes can be right. And if I could just call in and have it text to me, it would be like, hallelujah.
Exactly. And I think that's an area that we're very excited about, because just because we actually just started with cities. We didn't even realize counties and state agencies initially was going to be an interesting area. And then we saw so much demand on. And now, obviously, we're getting interest from the higher education side, et cetera. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the focus is really, I would say, like, SLED as a market is unique in the customer service it provides. And what's unique about it is that there's so many different services coupled with like organizational complexity. And so solutions, like take Apple, for example, they offer like a lot of, they're one of the biggest companies in the world, right? And they offer, I'm going to spitball like really 20 different product categories. That might be a little on the high end, but let's just say 20 different product categories. Your average like K through 12 institution or your smallest city, even like a 6,000 resident person town, offers far more than 20 different products, right? And so it's a different kind of challenge. And I think that's, Todd, to your point, exactly. Like that is I think a great fit for what we're trying to do, which is how do you make customer service for the most complex organizations in the world an amazing experience for their constituents, which might be parents, students, or, the community, while also making it easier for the staff. I think those are the two folks we serve in that equation.
All right. Thank you.
So follow up to my original question for you, Parth. In a world of AI, everything's AI today, how is Polymorphic standing out in such a crowded AI space, right? Where do you see yourselves differing from others?
So I think there's really a lot of excitement around AI, and anytime there's a gold rush, what ends up happening, and unfortunately, and I think a lot of our end customers, whether they're city, county, state agencies, K-12, all that, is people start slapping AI on everything.
Yep.
And I think there is a lack of understanding sometimes in some of these. I'll see them put AI on, and I'm like, no one on this team even has a background in AI, or they don't even have a single engineer on the team. Like, how can you claim that there's AI there? And frankly, it's because it's a sales technique for them, right? And I think for us, where we really stood out is, like, I ran the machine intelligence community at MIT for 2 years. Our VP of engineering worked on the initial voice AI at Google years before generative AI came out, right? So we have like a team of like folks that really like pride themselves on like truly understanding AI. And I think the reason that ends up mattering is we have this unique balance of, we have government experience and AI experience. We're probably the only, company in this like customer service space that deeply understands both. And so you see that in the products, right? You see that in how things work. Like, we understand, okay, when you're calling in to a government, like, we know here are like the 5-7 different trees and paths that can go down. And we've engineered our systems to make sure each of those is a really great experience, right? What happens when some folks just want to opt out, right? They just want to like talk to someone. Or what happens if it's after hours and it's a voicemail? What happens if we need to integrate with internal systems and they want to book an appointment? So I think there's a lot there. That's one. And I think the second place we stand out is like, we're a platform, not a point solution. And I think there's a lot of point solutions out there, which are really specific, and that's great. But I think for governments, they're starting to look at customer service needs to be a holistic experience, right? If I call into my, agency or county, I want it to be a unified experience for my constituent, regardless of what they're asking. So I should be able to ask everything from, what's my utility balance, to what's the status of my permit, to how do I apply for, or how do I request this pothole to get fixed, right? And so in that case, I think governments really appreciate that we start to become this fabric that sits over everything. And you might have internal systems that are specific for, you've got your permitting and licensing solution, you've got your utility billing solution. So we're plugging into those, but we are this comprehensive fabric for governments. And so that, I would say, are like really the two biggest differences. Is we have probably this unique knowledge of government, and we truly have an AI background, which shows up everywhere in the product. And then the second piece is like our product is really a platform, right? We believe that customer service is organization wide and really plugs in all those spots.
Sweet.
So Parth, you've given us some incredible insight on, the products and solutions that Polymorphic has. And, I think, for me and the listeners, one of the things I was hoping to, get some more information on is like, what's been the most surprising use case or customer story that you've seen so far?
Yeah, so there's one that really stands out. And I'm gonna lead into it with, a lot of our customers who use the chat, the search, the voice, like our AI customer service platform, or this concierge front desk. Their number one goal, right, is really to make that customer service experience amazing. And I think the way they often think about it is the fact that, hey, it's sometimes hard to get calls through, right? A lot of phone calls aren't getting answered. A lot of questions are going unanswered. It's impossible to provide service 24/7, right? I'm not going to ask my staff to be on all hours. It's impossible to provide service in all the different languages we handle, right? Not everyone's going to speak all the different languages sometimes. So those are like the obvious value points. And we'll see, like, within a week or two, like we had a few municipalities in Colorado, like Westminster and Littleton. They had their call volume. We were handling 50% plus of them end to end within the first 2 weeks. And I think that's like like we talked about, you're spending millions of dollars handling phone calls. 50% of that within 2 weeks already seeing handled by the AI end to end. Like that's awesome. Huge ROI right off the bat. So I lay that as the baseline of like, that's usually like the bread and butter, what we see, right? The one that blew me away though is we worked with a surrogate court in New Jersey, and I was talking to their surrogate Casanova is amazing. She's like truly one of the most innovative folks around AI. Amazing, perspective on customer service. And I remember talking to her about this, and I was expecting a similar answer, which was like, hey, we spend so much time now, my staff is able to like focus on the important things, all that. And she's like, yeah, all true, great. But she said, what's interesting? In Passaic County, we have 91 different languages spoken. And she said we had a call come in this weekend. That was a 12-minute conversation, and someone called in Bengali and had a 12-minute conversation fully in Bengali. And for folks who are listening who might not have surrogate courts in their region, surrogate courts they handle very sensitive matters. They handle basically wills, estates. So when someone calls in, it's usually like customer service is the number one thing that matters to them, right? Because a loved one's passed away, and surrogate always says you can't plan deaths. So people call in 2 a.m., 3 a.m., weekends. And so this person called
in shock and highly emotional.
In shock, highly emotional. They just want to know what to do, right? And so like I might have an appointment Monday. Like, what do I even bring in? This conversation goes on for 12 minutes, and it's like, the transcript's amazing, right? It starts with just like, hey, I had a loved one pass away, I have no idea what to do. The AI is like super understanding, consoling. It walks them through what documents they have. If you have a will, it's probate. If not, it's administering. It knows the legal nuances, all of that. And go through and this whole conversation happens in Bengali, right? And she tells us, that's the conversation that stood out to her. She's like, we've handled probably hundreds and hundreds of phone calls, but she said that might be the first time ever in that county, and she was like, probably in the country, because this was well over a year ago, that we don't have anyone in the office who speaks Bengali, and we just served a customer and then in Bengali. And so she's like, how do you put a price on that value, right? Like,
That's incredible. I got goosebumps right now.
Oh yeah. She's one of those stories which is like, that one, like, that's the kind of stuff that gets our team out of the bed in the morning. Is like that.
Yeah.
That's something. So I think that's an example of like, we talk a lot about efficiency, and obviously massive, ROI for our customers is important. But there's also these unquantifiable values that we underestimate, right? Which is, in the end, if you're in the customer service business, it's hard to put a price on. This was a customer we could never serve before, and now we're making sure that they get services. And so I think that's very special.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. Pretty powerful story. Thanks for sharing that. All right, so there's a lot of hype and fear around AI right now. I mean, you hear it on the media all the time, right? It's gloom and doom. What's one myth you'd love to just bust right now?
Oh man, that's such a good question. There's so many I could jump into. I think the main one, we liked about it. I think this is I would say especially specific to like to governments, to K-12 education, to those markets, is I think a lot of the narrative on AI has been driven by the private sector conversation. And the private sector conversation talks a lot about efficiency, right? And we just talked about it on the government side.
Right.
I think a lot of governments are taking that narrative and are sometimes I hear this concern of like, what does this mean for employees? Like, are we going to lose jobs and things like that? And I think for governments and adjacent industries, I would say that is maybe a 0% concern I would have. And the reason for that is I look at the real problem right now is almost every government is already understaffed. And
Good point.
And when you think about what AI is going to do, I think a lot of, like, I was talking to a city manager in a town in Florida, and they had this issue where they were like, we can't retain our front desk staff, right? Or they're like, our front desk is turning over every year. And the council's like, hey, we've never had this issue before. Like, let's look into why that's the case, right? Let's try to figure it out. Everyone's like trying to philosophize why that's the case. City manager does the controversial thing of, he's like, you know what? I'm going to work a week as a front desk staff. Let's see this role. And came back and he's like, I'm surprised any of them have stuck around, because the truth is, it's the same calls over and over again. It's not a fulfilling job. The people who do stay, they're trying to get into another role within the organization. I think we got to really ask this question of, there's all these things you have to do, but what are the things people want to do? And I think right now there's a massive misalignment there in government roles, right? So much time is spent on operational work of like what we have to do, right? We have to answer the calls. We have to deliver, that permit. We have to process this internal work. Mm-hmm. And I think there's some like fear in the uncertainty of what happens if we do simplify that. And people are maybe there's the uncertainty is, well, then maybe they don't need us or whatever. I don't think that's the right answer. I think the truth is there's a million things that folks would rather be spending their time on that they want to do, right? Yeah. If you take the Parks and Rec department, they want to be hosting more events in their community. What stops them from doing that is the number of phone calls and internal processes that they're managing just to make sure that the parks are maintained, basic questions are answered, etc. And so that's something that we love to do with our customers is like, their staff already knows. It's like, hey, if you could get 4 hours back a day, right? What would you spend those 4 hours doing? Everyone has an answer. Everyone has an answer of what they would rather spend those 4 hours doing. And once you point out that we're paying that cost already in the form of operational, boring rote work, which is affecting retention. And, we had a county in New Jersey where they went from 2,900 employees to 2,400 from attrition over the last 5 to 10 years.
Wow.
Their community expects better service than when they had 2,900 employees because every other industry's increased and they had to do it with 16% less staff, right? So I think it's a completely different calculus in government. Like, I think that is, frankly, not only the wrong mindset, I think it could become a very destructive mindset because it leads to a lack of urgency. Like right now, frankly, AI is the best solution we have to this. AI is the best solution we have to making sure that we don't drop services when 16% of our staff disappears over the last 5-10 years.
And there is a wave of retirement. It's here.
It's coming, exactly, 100%.
So how do you see AI changing the way people work in the next 5 years? I mean, 5 years is a long way from an AI perspective, but just, you're in it, you're in the trenches every day. So I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is kind of going back on that theme of, I think it's very easy to get accustomed to the way you've done things because it's the way we've always done them, right? And I think what AI is going to start to do is really what it's going to change is it's going to turn everyone in many ways into a type of manager, which is a kind of a weird way of framing it. But what I mean by that is AI is an extremely powerful tool for executing tasks. And I think what that means is, if that's true, my biggest value is defining those tasks and spending time on higher level creative thinking on what is actually helpful for the organization. So in the government lens, it would be, using that Parks and Rec example. My job in Parks and Rec is not to answer phone calls and to, process special event permits. That's actually not my job. My job is to make sure that folks in our community enjoy our parks, enjoy our recreation. We're providing a great experience there. That's really the job.
Yeah.
And so once you start to execute the defined work and can offset that to AI, that completely opens up what I can do. Right now, I'm spending time actually more on how can I get out in the community more? What programs can we be running? Maybe there's a park we've always wanted to create and open up, and now because of the savings we're seeing from the efficiency, we have more human resource time, we have staff time to go do that. So I think that's really going to become the change. It's like everyone's going to become a manager, right? Your front desk roles are going to change from we're answering calls directly to we're answering the complex calls that the AI can handle, but we're going to handle 70-80% of them 24/7 around the clock by helping manage the AI. That's going to become basically our front desk, right? So every IC role, I think, starts to shift into some pseudo IC, pseudo management.
It's a lot more rational than what you hear on the news every day, especially for the listeners. So thanks for sharing that.
So Parth, if you could design the perfect collaboration between humans and AI, what would that look like, you think?
So I think there would be probably 3 different components to it that I can think of. The first one I think we've kind of mentioned at length, right? Which is, if I can define a clear operational task, I can hand it off to AI. And so that to me is like clear operational tasks, hand that off, right? It's the stuff that I know we need to do, I probably don't want to do. That's a great use for AI, right? The second is what I kind of think of as an information gatherer, right? So one of the hard things is anytime you do research, whether it's to write a grant or to start a new program, we do a lot of work going pre-AI. You'd have to be, I'm going to do Google searches, I'm going to read some literature, I'm going to come through all this, and I'm basically taking a bunch of knowledge and trying to synthesize into my brain, right? I'm cramming all these like instances of information, cramming it into my brain and hoping that I can then synthesize that into something cohesive. AI is amazing at that, right? It's so good at going out, pulling resources in. I use deep research all the time for this, but basically coming up with briefings on, hey, I'll ask, what are the grant programs available in Michigan for local governments who want to innovate? I could do that through Google searches, but AI is much more effective at that. And then the third category is, I would say, is a mirror, right? So one of the things, and this is, I think, the most human piece that I don't really see AI like outsourcing it to AI. I don't think it's even wise to in this case, but it's like that creative work, right? That more high level work. And so if I'm thinking about going back to that parks example, right? I want to host more events in my parks, etc. That's an objective. AI can be a really good, almost like, I think of it as like an intern or like a devil's advocate that you could just like ask questions back and forth to, but it plays like mirror and helps me formulate my thoughts, right? So it can play back and forth. And I think those are the three areas I see opportunity: as a thing you direct, as a thing you collect information from, and as a thing that acts as a colleague or mirror to you to help articulate your goals and thoughts.
That's great.
It's really interesting. Wanted to switch gears here a little bit, talk about some thought leadership. As the CEO of Polimorphic, what has been like one of the toughest leadership lessons that you've had to learn since founding Polimorphic in 2019?
There's honestly so many, and there's probably so many I'd have even in 3 months. I'd be like, I wish I knew that 3 months ago even. But the one that comes to mind, or two, there's a few that come to mind. I think early days in a company, my role was really like, and not that I'm not today, I love being hands-on. I think it's the way to really see, get the pulse of what our customers, et cetera, need. Like I'm traveling and meeting with a lot of our customers constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, as you start to grow, you have multiple folks who do that, right? We have a team, and I think it's so easy to take for granted that all this knowledge or all these ideas that are in your head, everyone just instantly groks on the other side. Like they just know, like they get it too. And I think the first thing I learned there was, at first my reaction was like, this is obvious. Like why don't you know this already? And then I started to realize that I had never communicated it, right? It was just a thing in my head, and I just assumed like all the conversations I have with myself in my head are conversations I have real, which is just not true. So, I like to write in my free time, and I started to realize that was something I should be doing in the professional sense as well. Like I need to be writing a lot more and articulating the thoughts, and I think that was a big learning and still something that I'm working on. Related to that, there's this funny story of this other founder who once mentioned this to me. So he worked at some company, and he joked that, one day their founder came in and was upset about some deals or whatever, something was not going, like everything was on fire, right? Which is like, sometimes happens. And he comes in the conference room, they have a new conference room, and the TV is like not mounted. And he's like, even the TV's not mounted. And then like, what? His office and then like, close his door. He comes out like 30, 40 minutes later, and there's like 3 people trying to mount this TV on the conference room. And I think something you underestimate is, like I underestimate all the time, is like people take my work, like everything I say, very seriously, which is great. It sounds great in theory, but it's just because you're a CEO, like your title means nothing in a knowledge work driven environment, right? Our team knows a lot more than I do about 99% of things. And so I had to be very careful about what I do and don't say. And I think that's really important too, which is in many ways, it's starting to develop that mindset of that internal filter of, is this something worth bringing up now? Or do I need to sit on this for a little bit more? Is it like an emotion I'm feeling just now? And should I sit on it for some time? I think there's like great stories about Lincoln where he would like write letters and keep them in his drawer. And if he looked at it the next morning and still thought it was appropriate, only then would he send it out. And I think that is, I have a lot of admiration for Lincoln. So I'm trying to get to that, but I think that is like an example of like, it's not easy. It's so easy to be driven by what you feel in that moment. And you think, and that exact point in time, I'm 100% sure and I'm right. And you think about it like 2 days later and you're like, God, that was dumb, right? That wasn't right.
Parth, I have what's called the 24-hour rule. And anyone that's been worked alongside with me or in the organization or friends or family, it's like when something happens, you have 24 hours to either celebrate it or be upset about it, but don't let it affect anyone else, right? And then you move on, start over again, right? Because we can get still latched around something, and it's just as simple as the 24-hour rule. Rob and Dan know all about it.
Oh yeah.
We're bringing that to Polymorphic for sure.
So Parth, got a little bit of a life question for you. When you're not building the future of AI, how are you staying recharged, staying creative? What do you do on your off time when it's not about AI?
So I love the outdoors. I like sports and things like that. I'm a huge basketball fan. So like to play basketball. Been getting into swimming recently. Like to run, all those things. Tennis. I also like to write in my free time and love to cook. And so those are ways just to different creative outlets that I like to keep going. So those are all great. Yeah, I think those are fun. Trying to read a lot more too. I always joke that reading is one of those interesting experiences where in a world of like distractions, right? Like you can watch Netflix shows and folks are on social media and stuff. Reading is one of the weird things which is like it demands your full attention, right? Like you can't, like a lot of other things, how many screens can you fit, right? People are on their phone, all that on the TV, and like reading is like you can only read the book. That's it. That's all you can do. So I like, in general, like being outdoors and reading and those kind of things because it forces my brain to just calm down. Yeah, like relax for a second, take it.
Or just focusing on one thing, right? Staying focused on one thing and not being pulled in a million directions.
100%.
Well, thanks for sharing that because I think there's a lot of people in this industry that could use some of that advice. I'll tell you, it's always changing and there's always new things going on to stay on top. So, great information. What we're going to do is kind of like a rapid fire round here, just to have some fun and see what you had to say. So, what's your favorite tech gadget you can't live without besides your phone? Everyone has their phones.
Mine is not my phone. First off, I hate my phone. Like I use it if I need to, but I hate my phone. It really is like one of my least favorite gadgets. Oh, my favorite. That's a tough question. I feel like a lot of kitchen tech gadgets I have are some of my favorites, honestly.
Okay.
So I had,
like what? Give us an example.
so I'll give you, the one I swear by is I found like it's technically is an induction like water heater, but it's like what you use for like sous vide, right? People think like sous vide is like this super expensive thing that only fancy restaurants do. Like it's actually surprisingly like possible to do. It's not that expensive, etc. The thing I love about it though is you can like put something in this water bath and you like vacuum seal it, throw it in. And one of the things that's like challenging with cooking is to find like the magic 3, right? Something that doesn't take a ton of my time, right? That's easy to prepare and still tastes like really, really good. Like find the best, flavor quality. And sous vide kind of does that, right? Because it holds things at the perfect temperature. You just set it and you just forget it, right? You don't need to do anything with it from there. So I swear by that. Like that is my favorite gadget by far.
All right. This may be a tough one for you. The best advice you've ever received.
All right, I'm gonna pick 2. I know that's cheating because best is usually means 1. So
We'll take 2. We're all about best practices at Avalon.
perfect. So the first one is, someone once told me like, building a company is very hard. Don't make it harder. And I always was like, what does that mean? But like then I really started to understand it, which is, I think as a founder and a lot of our team, they're very ambitious. They're amazing at what they do. And so there's a pride in like, we're going to take the hard road. And I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves like, you're already on the hard road. Like sometimes a simple like path, sometimes a clear win, like you got to take that. Like it's already difficult. Don't make it harder, right? Don't like put yourself through more than you need to there. Our number one goal is to deliver for our customers, right? And so anything that makes that mission more possible, that's what we got to do. The quote I live by though is people attribute it to Emerson. I'm not sure who it's actually attributed to, but it's the strength within you is always greater than the task ahead of you. And I think that's something I repeat to myself often, which is I really do believe that. Like the strength within us is greater than any task we can face.
That's great. I do. That is phenomenal. All right. Can you name a book, podcast, or movie that influenced how you think now? It could be sci-fi. It could be fiction, whatever.
I do love sci-fi. So let's see. All right, movies. One of my favorites is Good Will Hunting. I love Good Will Hunting. Might be biased. I went to MIT, so that's long. Shah. Books right now. I've been reading High Output Management by Andy Grove, and that has been a fascinating book. Like so interesting. It's so practical. Love that one. And then the other one that I think of, so there's a lot out there, but you know, I read The Great CEO Within. That was a great one as well. I think that there's quite a few books in that realm that have been. I love when books like, there's a lot of books that the first 100 pages you read and you're like, I got the idea, and it's just the next 200 are repeating the same thing. I really appreciate when it's like each chapter is like, that's actually a unique, interesting insight. Like that's interesting too. So I think those are the ones that come to mind right now, but I'm sure there's many more.
All right. I saved the hard ball for the last question. If Polymorphic had a theme song, what would it be?
That is a great question, and we probably
Don't mess this up. Don't mess this up, Parth.
I'm gonna go with. Oh man. Oh, that's a good one. I feel like anything John Denver could be on there.
Wonderful.
Take me home, country roads.
I mean that just speaks to all the country. Like I feel like that's got to be it. I think that's I would even take Rocky Mountain High like that. Love it. So those, yeah, I think those are great ones. But yeah, anything John Denver.
Great answer. That's amazing. Oh gosh, well that's a wrap on today's episode of Job and Jargon powered by Avalon Technologies. A huge thank you to our special guest Parth Shah for sharing his insights on how AI is transforming local government and making services more accessible and efficient. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this podcast with your network. You can find more episodes on our website at www.avalontech.net. That's AVALONTECH.net, or on YouTube by searching Job and Jargon powered by Avalon Technologies. Until next time, keep innovating, keep learning, and remember, every great idea starts with a little bit of jargon and a lot of Java. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Parth. You have a wonderful day.
Thank you all. This is great. Appreciate y'all.
Appreciate it. Great meeting you.
Bye now.
Take care.